we're going to talk to Drew, who's calling in from Washington. Drew, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of things, but like my main thing was about how like incest in the Bible and stuff would not be physically like possible. And like, but I also want to like quickly touch bases with the other stuff you guys will talk about afterwards. So I'll just go quickly through the incest one.
Okay.
So yeah, it happens a lot in the Bible. Like literally the first thing, Adam and Eve or whatever, you know, like Eve is apparently literally like a part of his DNA. So like that's already a problem. Like intersex people literally can't even like, yeah, intersex people have problems and sometimes they die depending on the type because they can't like have like children with themselves if they have both like sets of genitalia or whatever, you know. It causes their body to like spaz out basically. So that's already a problem. And then there's another one where very early in the Bible, it was early in Genesis and stuff, like right after like the like whole Sodom got obliterated by God, you know. Lot was drugged by his two daughters and raped by them, and then they had two kids that basically like became great nations or whatever, you know. And it's like, okay, there was this one family in Kentucky that ended up being like isolated. I'm pretty sure it's Kentucky. I might not be right on the state, but it's basically in that area. Pretty sure it's Kentucky, but they ended up having to like, in order to survive, they had to like do a lot of incest, and it caused them to have blue skin. And you don't see people like walking around with blue skin necessarily, you know. And there's other things like some people will claim that like if you have just one man and like 20 women or something, that's totally fine. But then that's a lot of half siblings, and then possibly like other things, you know, going on like parents and children too, and that's like not good at all genetically or morally. But yeah, it'd be like you probably need at least 5 to 10 men at the least. But yeah, like there's a whole bunch of like stuff that's wrong with that, and like even like lions in Asia that were like so few in the numbers, they would like do incest because there was barely any lions there, and it ended up like their bodies ended up naturally aborting it because it couldn't handle it. So yeah, that's like the whole incest thing. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, Drew, I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of incest stories in the Bible that, if taken at face value, don't seem to make sense. As you've mentioned before, specifically, you know, you mentioned lion populations, but current cheetah populations right now, as we see them, are very like are genetically identical because they had kind of a stopgap in their a bottlenecking in their population at some point in their history, and that's why we see some of the genetic abnormalities that come out of that today, because you need a population that has diverse genetic inputs in order to have diverse genetic outputs. Otherwise, you're going to have breed of similar stock. We say the same thing about humans. I believe the date is about 70,000 years ago where there was a bottlenecking of human species as well. That anthropologists have come to today. But I was never a person, Drew, that actually literally believed in those stories. For the most part, I think I kind of had a more progressive understanding that maybe these were just kind of allegories about wider things. I don't know what I really believe, but yeah, I mean, if you ask the average Christian what they might say of that, you know, some of them will say, well, you know, during that time, God protected them from genetic abnormalities. That's it. And that it only came later, you know, or they'll just kind of have these what are called post hoc rationalizations that don't really make a lot of sense when we look at it from a modern scientific worldview. Alice, what do you think?
Yeah, it makes me think, when I was a kid, I was fixated on the Cain and Abel story and how thinking like, oh, so they had to mate with their mom. Yeah. And my dad being like, no, they didn't do that. Like by then there were more. And it says, you know, the one that left Cain, right? The one that left, he like went to go populate a different thing. And so it's just assumed that there were other people in existence by that time. And I always wondered like, but where did they come from though? Like how long, like how many cousins, like how many siblings was Cain doing to keep it going? But, you know, it's not unique to the Bible, to Judaism or Christianity. You know, in ancient Egypt, and even in present day the British monarchy. The British queen right now is married to, I think, her second cousin, is it? But like in monarchies and in religions throughout time, it's thought, the goal is to keep the bloodline pure. And what we know now is that it actually it's not good to keep it pure in that sense. It actually leads to a lot of impurities. And like you were saying, like automatic abortions, spontaneous abortions, that's the term I'm looking for, miscarriages, because it's not a viable fetus. But yeah, I think it's definitely very interesting to observe incest. And I've thought, another thought that I've had is like, it seems like incest and bestiality are kind of like the last taboos that we've begun exploring in cinema. Kind of, I mean, Game of Thrones with the sibling relationship there is kind of exploring it, but it's interesting like how it's timeless. Incest is kind of timeless, and obviously problematic for many reasons.
That's an interesting. Incest is timeless. Alice Greczyn.
Timeless. Take with that what you will. I'm not saying it's okay, but it's
no. But I know what you mean. It's
around.
a recurring theme.
Yeah.
In not just like Judaism and Christianity, and obviously Islam as well, but like other cultures outside the West too have opinions about incest. Like a lot of them thinking like, yes, this is how you keep this bloodline pure, which is really interesting, but of course doesn't line up with what we know today about some of the effects of what happens when you do that. So Drew, you're on the money. You definitely have some good observations there that you should definitely challenge other people around you to see what they come up with, because their answers are probably not going to be very good. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah. I want to expand on the purity thing, because you know how people, like in the past, until more recently, like especially, would just like breed dogs with their siblings or their grandparents or whatever because they wanted purebreds, and it actually has caused a lot of problems. Like in German Shepherds, they have hip problems. In pugs, my dog is half pug, and even though he doesn't have the like squash nose, he still has some respiratory issues because of that. And even though it like lessened because of like the like two different dog breeds being mushed together, both my dogs are like mutts, by the way, but like even though they were mushed together, it did like reduce it, because it has been found in mutts to reduce the issues a lot with that, because of all the like inbreeding a lot, so much that it causes these problems, and it like reduces them when you like get them with different breeds.
Yep, and that's
one of my dogs, River. I
was just saying, that's what selective breeding. That's when we had the choice of deciding who these partners were for animals and stuff. So yeah, it can ultimately become a very cruel system. So yeah, that right there, first of all, is evidence of evolution, which you should point out for people always. But also, like, can again, just expands on your point, right? Like makes you question what these stories really mean when they say that these incestual relationships exist, not just in Adam and Eve, but in other parts of the Bible as well. Lot's daughters and other stories too. But Drew, I'm sorry I have to kind of cut you short. We are already over time. I think I've got about all the time I can have right now with going overtime, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go. But thanks for calling in with your call and talking about what you wanted to talk about. It is an interesting sort of through line through the Bible, isn't it, Alice? All the incest. It's quite a bit.
Yes.
More than you'd expect when you first like dive into it, right?
And under discussed.
Under discussed. Yeah. I don't think people want to think about the implications there,